Welcome to another CEO Wisdom podcast. We have Rainer Karcher with us. Rainer's founder and CEO at Heartprint, is driving the future readiness at the intersection of digitalization and sustainability. So he's been a chief sustainability officer. He's a climate activist in a suit. Born 334 ppm. We'll have to figure out what that means. And he's fighting for a future below 450 ppm, which I guess is particle per meter. What is this, Rainer?
Per million,
Per million. Okay, cool. Interesting. Well, we'll double click on that. Rainer has a cool background. He's in Eying, Bavaria, Germany. I'm in Oaxaca, Mexico. And yeah, we're going to talk about ESG today, about sustainability, about the climate change and how corporations can intervene and have their own fair share of the future beauty or not beauty that's going to be our world and the planet here. So this podcast is brought to you by podprayer.com. If you want to start a podcast and have cool guests like Rainer and potentially even clients and investors, you can go to podprayer.com. We help you manage the full podcast funnel so that you can get clients and investors in less than 90 days. Rainer, welcome to the podcast. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah, thank you very much, first of all, for having me. It's a great honor to be with you, Charles, and I'm really pleased to share a bit of my perspective. You already brought up a couple of things at the beginning. So I'm in the southern rural district of Munich, which might be better known worldwide than Eying, which is very, very tiny. We are much famous for the brewery. I know in the US, there is a lot of beers being sold there, which is from exactly that hometown where I'm living at. I'm living here with my wife and with my three children, or our three children, aged 4, 11, and 13 years old. So this is a bit of already building a bridge in what drives me and motivates me each day to be optimistic and fight for the future and try to make a positive impact into this. And this is my kids. So in origin, I started my business career in 1997 in the IT sector at IBM at that time. And since then, I did spend a lot of different various responsibilities within big corporations. Some of the more famous ones are Bertelsmann. Then there was Telecom, and then there was Siemens. Siemens had been by far the biggest impact which I've ever worked at. So more than 10 years there in corporate IT for Siemens. And then in the last role, I had been, prior to found my own company, I had been Chief Sustainability Officer of Allianz in the insurance sector, which is known as well. Well, and about 13 years ago, as my daughter was born, the aspect of sustainability became more present to me because I started thinking about what is the future of my children looking like and what will it be in 20, 30, 40, 50 years and what is the influence I can take into this. So I've started to get passion for sustainability at the beginning for permaculture. So permaculture is not only about agriculture in a permanent cycle. It's about a methodology in sharing knowledge, sharing expertise, and just taking care on your own in a circular respect. And this brought me then to sooner or later start in thinking about how can I combine what I do for living and what I am quite experienced with, which is IT. And on the other side, what is sustainability all about? And this brought me to that climate activist in a suit idea and that thought, which is not only getting along like, I don't know, Fridays for Future or anybody who is a climate activist and pointing towards what it needs to be, but combining that with economical aspects. And being in big corporations for more than 27 years told me so, that you have to always find ways in doing things. But yeah, this is a bit about me. So 47 years old and passion for what I do in the combination of sustainable and digital.
And you also worked at various corporations. Did that sort of alienate you? Because I think that corporations are probably the least environmentally conscious and the most hypercritical, in my opinion. So what was your experience working at big companies, and did they actually respect the environment or just greenwash it?
Well, it's a bit of both. So on one hand, being in a big corporate gives a lot of influence, a lot of power, and that empowerment, if you're, for example, in the IT sector, is something which helps a lot. And that support, for example, in regard of getting visibility, getting an exchange, a good exchange with someone who is working on that, just helped a lot to started to create transparency. So what I mean on that is, As I've started with IT and digital and sustainability and that combination about 5 years ago, it was pretty hard to find a good, accurate answer to the question of how much carbon footprint, how much energy is being emitted or consumed with the IT assets I'm just operating here as a big corporation. And as you can imagine, Siemens at that time, 360,000 employees worldwide, huge corporation. So there is a lot of IT which is being operated, and mainly in cloud. So that means big hyperscalers like AWS or like Azure or like Google. And the biggest question at that time just got unanswered. It was something which the hyperscalers either did not want to or had not been able to answer. And that was one of the things me as an individual, now in my own role with my own company, Heartprint, I never would have had any kind of a chance to get in touch with the most responsible persons in that corporation, that companies. But being a Siemens employee and that big brand behind me just opened the doors. So this is the one hand and the one side of that. The flip side of the coin is, for sure, stock listed companies are always driven by annual shareholders and driven by dividends and not that much driven by being the most sustainable company on the planet. So ecological and economical aspects are a bit of a balance in between both. And at the end of the time, for sure, in most of the cases, it's more a economical question and less an ecological one. But in the meantime, things developed and changed over time. So there is a lot of influence from big corporations looking into things and trying to take a positive influence.
And what's the percentage of responsibility of corporation to this current global warming? Is it 30%? Is it 40% vs consumers?
So it's a very, very good question and the most important from my point of view. So there is that climate activist, now maybe giving you for the first time a bit of a glance of what I mean on that. To me, the biggest enemy is oil and gas. And oil and gas industry is for a very huge reason to me the enemy, because they are the ones influencing the most, and they are the ones having the biggest percentage on carbon emissions and on climate change. But they are not fighting against it. They're trying to avoid people from getting that transparency and visibility. So one example to make that a bit more clear, it had been BP, so the British petrol company, who invented the personal carbon footprint calculator. So now if you're looking into things, what is my own personal behavior and what is my way of living and consuming and the way I'm eating, what kind of influence is that having? That was an invention of BP to distract that it's the 7 largest oil and gas companies who are responsible for 40% of carbon emissions worldwide. And so therefore, it is for sure big corporates. The question you've had is a bit difficult to answer because it very much is different from industry to industry. If you take I don't know, banking or finance industry or insurance industry where I did work on, their primary influence due to their digital and mostly service-oriented business is very limited. They, well, for sure have influence through their investments and through asset. But if you take a factory, for example, or automotive and production and wherever there is energy be consumed, their influence is way higher. Fact is that it's the biggest 100 companies in the world which are responsible for 90% of the emissions worldwide. And so therefore, it is less our own personal behavior, more than the influence of big corporates, which doesn't necessarily mean that we should turn it the other way around and say, well, it doesn't matter what I do individually as a person at home. That does have a choice for sure as well, maybe in other aspects.
Right. And oil and gas companies, I guess the argument is that they provide economic wealth to the world. Yes, most people working at these companies in Western countries already have that wealth. I guess it's mostly comfort, right? Like just and tolerance from the government, and sometimes lobbying and bribes and so forth. So
Right.
why are these companies still alive and active, and are they actually making changes in their activity? Is that electrical revolution on, and it's only gonna be better from now onward for the full world?
Very good question. Well, if you turn back history a bit and if you just look at it, what it had been in the past, there was always industries who had been able, through lobbyism, through a huge amount of money being invested into marketing and campaigns, in trying to distract from the real effects they are having. Tobacco industry is one of them. Sugar industry is one of them. Then there is, I don't know, rifles and weapons in the US is a big issue on that. And oil and gas is in the same way. So they do have a lot of empowerment, a lot of influence through investments into lobbyism, a lot of very close connections to politics. And I mean, if you just take the latest elections in the US or here in Germany here as well, there had been millions of investments from oil and gas companies, direct or indirect, into the election process and into the pre-election of those candidates. So that means, in fact, they're using their financial strength and their investments to just distract from what science already knows since quite a lot of time. And again, funnily or not that funny, it was oil and gas who did give a science-based study in fact, which was in the 60s, looking into the effect of burning oil and gas. And it was the industry at that time, the oil and gas industry, who had the clearance and more or less an accuracy of 99% that what's happening right now, so the climate disasters, droughts, and whatever we've seen, strong weather results or fires, massively increased strong weather results, that had been predicted in the 60s already, and all oil and gas knew about it. And they do have, well, they would have had two choices from my point of view. The one choice would have been in fighting and trying to find new business models and changing what they do. But on the other side, they decided for the second option, which was trying to cover and to hide that results from science. And even one step further, and this is why I declare them as my biggest enemy, they just discriminate science and they discriminate scientists and try to find, I don't know, 5 scientists or who are trying to avoid saying the reality and trying to find arguments why climate change isn't man-made, isn't real, and is happening anyhow, even if there is 200,000 scientists saying the other way around. And this is a bit of that distracting and covering the outcome of what they do.
And what's the specific conversation behind closed doors? Is it just a couple of billionaire bros being like, yeah, that's just how it's done. That's let's just roll it under the carpet. Like, what is the actual argumentative and what's the emotional rational behind that? Do they just like hide all the skeletons in the closet and hope it doesn't pop up one day? Don't these people want legacy as well?
Well, I think it's mostly money which is driving that whole thing. So it is for sure driven mostly by the big investments which they have and getting richer and richer each day. I mean, if you just now take New Zealand, for example, all the bunkers and new buildings which has been started just in the last 3-4 years, and all of them being financed from those billionaires in a lot of surroundings who are investing into oil and gas. They're doing that because they know that things are going to happen, and they know about climate crisis. They know that they have to find an exit place and a spot to exchange. So it's not about that they would decline that it's not real, or that they would just try to find an alternative reality or alternative news. What they are, from my point of view, just ignoring is the long-term perspective. And this is a bit of what the biggest issue on sustainability is. If you reduce it to carbon emissions, if you reduce it to climate change, if you're emitting today, you won't see the effect of tomorrow. You don't have an ability to smell or to see or to touch any kind of those effects. This is something which comes over time. And I think what we are pretty much used to in the economical world is in thinking about 1-term or 2-term type of relationships. It's about a year or two from annual shareholder to annual shareholder conference. We're thinking about what is the next turn of maybe my responsibility as the CEO of a company. And unfortunately, that's the complete opposite of what we need to have, because sustainability is a long-term game. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint which takes a year or two. It's something which is for 50 or 100 years. And what I'm trying to always explain sustainability with is forest. And the forest is something where the term sustainability originally started with. So those who are using a forest as an economical aspect and cutting wood out of that, they're planning in 75 to 100 year circles, because they have to, because an oak tree is growing at least 75 years until you're able to cut it and create wood out of that. So that means literally if you cut more than that, and if you cut it shorter, or if the surrounding is not suitable for a oak tree to grow up in that 75 or 100 years because of droughts or floodings or whatever type of things, then you'll have an economical issue and not only an ecological one. And this is where the term started and what the whole explanation is all about. So we have to think on a long-term perspective, but unfortunately we don't. And this is maybe due to financial interests and short-term aspects and maybe ignoring the future of children or grandchildren.
Right. It's funny because I asked GPT that question, like to build up like a conversation that happens behind closed door, and it cited two of the professions I hate the most: PR and legal. With the CEO, right? Like the CEO is like, "Hey, let's do that," and then there's his PR person to tell them that it's okay to lie, and then the legal person, which is like, "Yeah, let's do this so that we don't get into trouble." And ethics is nowhere in that conversation, right? And consequences, and like just like the other person, the other humans, animals, and or very house. It's not in that conversation, which is always interesting to me how these people just repress everything, right? And like what they're doing, and they just completely ignore the version of reality just to get wealthier, and most of them are not even happier with that wealth. I mean, at least if you could enjoy it, but most don't. Now, my follow-up question for you is, why did you decided to actually start a company and do something about that right now, and how are you going to make money with this yourself? Because you cannot scale your ideologies and your mission, your vision, if you don't have people paying you for that. So tell us a bit more about the business there.
Absolutely agreed. So, well, first of all, I thought to myself, I have to have an influence taken into what's happening all around us. And I did see the momentum in the world that there is a lot of examples worldwide which are positively and optimistically driving sustainability as a business model. And future readiness is something which came as a term into my mind to change the narrative. I mean, in the past, sustainability and people like me in that bubble tended to be like, you should not eat that much meat and reduce your travels and fly less. And it's more a bit of prohibition and maybe a bit of too much of that raised finger type of a situation. And I just then turned into that, again, back to the climate activist, a bit of a combination of both, and economical aspects combined with ecological things to make it attractive. And there is a lot of examples. If you take electricity, which is now in my home turf, so to say, in digital and IT, one of the most demanded aspects beside water, and electricity can either come out of coal-powered or gas-powered plants, or it could come out of renewables. And renewables, in the meantime, are the most efficient and therefore most cost-efficient ways of creating energy. So therefore, there is a perfect combination of economical interest and ecological interest as well. And it is for a reason that China is the society in the world which did create the biggest amount of new solar fields within 2024. It was by far more than the US and Europe in combination. And that is not just because they want to save the planet. They would like to maybe improve the air quality they have in their surroundings. That is one of the reasons for sure. But the majority of reasons for that companies in China is purely economical. And for them, they don't even question it whether renewables are the future or not. The same with individual transport. If you see the amount of new cars in China, in the Asian market, in the meantime, more than 80% are electric cars and battery electrical vehicles. They don't even produce that much fossil typical standard cars any longer, like we are doing it in Germany or in Europe and in the US. They have already understood that the future is electric. And this is something which to me gives a perfect future perspective how to treat things. And what I figured on the other side is, if you are in a company surrounding, and not maybe the stock listed ones, they're already quite advanced. So many of them, and majority of them, do have already divisions and responsibilities like I used to be in the past. So chief sustainability officers and sustainability teams. But if you go one step lower in regard of sizing of such companies, in Europe, we have a very strong economy based on small, medium-sized companies. So the SME world here makes about 90% of the economy in regard of financial aspects. And they are mostly suppliers of that big corporate. So there, if you go into tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, so over the stages, you have thousands and 10,000s of companies who are sizes from maybe 50, 100 hidden champion style up to 5,000, 10,000 employees. And they don't have the ability, they don't have the understanding of where to start with sustainability and how to proceed further to combine ecological and economical aspects. So what my decision had been, being 27 years in big corporates, was a bit Robin Hood style. So take it from the big and hand it to the smaller ones. And this is how I started with my own business, in being an consultant or advisor, or maybe, and the best term, which I think describes the most what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, is a translator. I'm trying to translate sustainability acronyms and try to find explanations and answers through digitalization. And that combination, in not answering well to get more sustainable, you need to hire a team of 25 people and invest $2 million. The answer could be, and in a lot of cases is, invest into digital, which is anyhow a necessity. And then if you have automation established, if you have maybe support through AI and digital components, you can very quickly return the investment and get sustainable and have economical aspects combined as an advantage. And this is what I do for a living. Your question, am I able to make money with that? My wife is asking me the same thing very, very often. So that's a very good question. But so far, I had been able to survive the first 9 months pretty well. And even in such challenging times where sustainability is, for various different reasons, pushed aside and deprioritized. It's the same in Europe than what it is in the US, I guess, through political decisions. It still is something which a lot of companies, a lot of people do understand. And I mean, what I'm trying to always find openness for is future readiness does have an impact on the company as well. And just giving you one example, if I would have a production site maybe somewhere close to a river, and there is at least a certain risk of floodings and strong rains, I would like to have that transparency up front. I would like to know what is going to happen if there is a flooding taking place. Do I have a plan B? Is there a second factory which could produce? And if not, of how long am I able to survive if that flooding takes not just a day or two, but maybe 6 or 8 weeks? Or another example, if I'm depending on a supplier from Asia and the supplier has to pass with a cargo ship through Panama Channel, and Panama Channel might have, I don't know, due to a long, very, very dry summer, way too little water to have the big cargo ships running through it, but have to bypass, that takes them 6 longer weeks. Is that something I'm able to survive? Or do I have maybe alternatives here as well? And this is about sustainability as well. So future readiness comes with a transparency, comes with an understanding of dependencies, either what is my business doing and the other way around, what is the environment doing to my business? And this is what I'm trying to get along with companies and trying to support them and help them.
Rainer, thank you so much for today. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, first of all, it's the easiest way to connect with me on LinkedIn. So if you go to LinkedIn, you'll find my name quite easily. If you even search for the term climate activist in a suit, you'll most likely run directly into me. Beside that, my website is online on heartprint.eu, like Europe. And I am beside that roles, which maybe is another very nice interest for the audience in the US. I'm working on a pro bono basis for an NGO, which is called sustainableIT.org. So if you're interested in the combination of sustainability in IT and through IT, into standards, into responsible AI maybe as well, sustainableIT.org is the way to go. We are an NGO 3 years ago founded, and in the meantime, 120 member companies all around the globe, mainly in the US. So we have a very strong presence there, and very much interested in connecting with all the others, and that is on sustainableIT.org.
It was Rainer Karcher and Charles Cormier for another